All right. Howdy, folks. My name is James Berg. I'm a senior researcher at Electronic Arts Vancouver. With me also, as you'll probably see at least the top of my small gray cat, Boo. I am a white male in his early 40s in a EA accessibility t-shirt and a button-down shirt. And with me are my panelists, Levy, Jess Tompkins, Vivian Ortenzi, and Zhou. Get everyone to do a quick round of introductions. Oh, sorry. I also work for the Central Accessibility team here at EA. So hand it over to Laura for quick introductions.
Hi everybody. My name is Laura. I am a research scientist and human factors psychologist at the Georgia Institute of Technology. I'm also research director of a research center here, which is called Games and Esports Applied Research, which conveniently spells GEAR. And I primarily work with industry to do what's called research translation. So getting all this really cool basic research knowledge that can get siloed in an academic context and get that out into the industry space, into applied contexts. I am also on the steering committee of the IGDA GRUX special interest group with Jemmy. So we're both on that steering committee and we'll be telling you a little bit more about that. So I'll pass it to Jemmy now.
Thanks. My name is Jimmy Zhou. Currently, I'm at Riot Games. I'm a researcher on the gameplay side of League of Legends focusing. Do a little bit of work in R&D and other stuff like Arcane as well. Like Laura said, I am also on the steering committee of the IGDA GRUX Discord and acting as like the current treasurer as well. I will pass it off to Jess.
Thanks, Jimmy. Hi, everyone. My name is Jess. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a user experience researcher at EA. I currently work almost exclusively on product-focused user experience research. So doing usability work and user experience work to inform development of products across the development cycle at EA. I also do really enjoy doing more formative and strategic work when I have opportunities to do so in my career. In addition to being an industry practitioner of games user research, I have a PhD in media arts and sciences. When I started my career in 2018, I was what's called ABD, all but dissertation. So I was dissertating to finish up my degree for several years while working in the industry. And I defended earlier this spring, which was, of course, to my enormous relief that I finally got it done. But like Laura, I also have put in time academically understanding and studying games at the intersections of social psychology and understanding like the ways in which players engage with games and the types of effects that video gaming experiences have on players and what that means for the players. I've specifically taken an interest in the intersections of identity and representation. So that's where my interest and expertise lies, both academically and professionally. And with that, I'll hand it off to, I think, Vivian.
Hey. Hello all, I'm Vivian, she, her pronouns. I'm working in design for about 10 years and just currently 5 years in game design and games. I have a bachelor's degree in game design, graduated in Brazil. So I've been in Canada for almost 5 years now, working in the industry. And currently I'm working at KBM and the team of Marvel Contest of Champions. I worked previously at Minecraft and it was mind-blowing to start in the industry with Minecraft. So, and yeah, so let's start.
All right. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate everyone joining us today. So what we're going to do is go through some of the GRUX kind of news. GRUX is I think we're still the largest industry organization for games research and user experience professionals. So thank you to Celia for inviting us to chat. I'm not actively involved with running the group here, which is why we've brought in Laura and Jimmy, who are active members of the steering committee for the organization. Jess is one of our event runners. And then we want to make sure that design was represented. So we've got Vivian representing that group as well. So let's start with just information about the organization, kind of what's been going on. Laura, do you want to kick us off there?
Yeah, sure. So if you're not already aware of this special interest group, we really invite you to come and join us. So if you go to it's GRUX.org, there's a link there that explains what the SIG is all about. We have an active Discord, so really invite you to go and click on that link. Or is the link? James, do we still have to go through the LinkedIn actually? That's something I was going to check before. Or
So
I think
the
you could maybe go from.
the official organization, signing up for the organization is through LinkedIn. That's the official membership roster.
Do that.
There's not a lot of things happening in terms of like content being shared on LinkedIn these days. The majority of that has moved over to the Discord.
Okay, so go to the LinkedIn, join the Discord. We have a variety of different programs and support no matter where you are and your career path. So there's a group for students, we have a mentorship program, there's job postings. We also just completed the GRUX online conference that was a couple of weeks ago, led by esteemed colleagues and members of the community like Emma Vario and Sebastian Long, amongst others. Those talks are still on the YouTube, in fact. So if you haven't already subscribed to our YouTube channel, you can go to GRUX-SIG on YouTube and you can find both tracks there. And they have some really nice accessibility support as well with an ASL interpreter and captions. Jimmy, is there anything else that you want to add?
Yeah, so the GRUX currently, I don't know if we're jumping in here. I didn't know if you still want to talk about GRUX online, Laura, for this.
No, I'll pass it. I'll pass it to you from there.
Okay. Currently we're doing a few things right at the bat, as in like announced initiatives. We're still running the mentorship program. Hannah is helping us with the being on the steering. Hannah Murphy is in the steering committee as well, and also running like the Games UR Summit for 2022. A few of the projects we've already announced are like a website refresh and update to kind of like help modernize it a bit more. Like kind of like streamline our initiatives platform to help us like kind of go through ideas of what we want to do to help improve the orgs, and also accept kind of like feedback and ideas about like how others in the community think we should improve it as well. And finally, kind of like a repository knowledge base, because a lot of good information gets shared on a Discord that ends up getting kind of like lost, because the only way of organization right now is starring it. And a lot of people star a lot of things. So it ends up just being like a long list of going through stars, and it feels like just going through any other channel at this point. So that's pretty much all of our announced work that we're doing for other stuff. We're still doing a few projects in the background that we haven't like talked about openly yet, because we don't feel like that it's ready to be like shared right off the bat. So that's how like GRUX is doing right now. I think as of now, we're growing like faster than ever. We have like a lot of people. I know a ton of new students keep joining us all the time. And it's fairly active in like helping out like newcomers, like beginners get their feet on the ground and kind of like get information of like how industry professionals are like working.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we used to make the joke, air quotes joke, that if you want a degree in games research, at least there's a lot of content there. Just pick one of the GRUX Discord channels, scroll to the top, and by the time you're done, you'll know a lot more than you did. At least you'll know enough to ask better questions. All right, so we had the organization hosts events on a regular cadence, COVID notwithstanding. So last year we had, earlier this year, we had one of our largest events, which was Games UR 2021, making sure I get the dates here right. Jess was one of our co-directors. So Jess, do you want to speak to that event?
Sure, thanks, James. So as James just alluded to, we had one of our larger events for the GRUX community called the Games User Research Summit, and we celebrated, I believe, our 20th anniversary as of this year. It was quite a milestone. Was it 10 or 20?
10.
10. Sorry. Okay, 10 years. I was a little overboard there with my estimate. But we held the 10th anniversary of the summit in May of this year, and it was our first all online Games User Research Summit event, which was an enormous success for that milestone. So there's a number of talks, which I believe James was kind enough earlier to share our YouTube channel, which is a wonderful archive of not just this year's earlier presentations from the GRUX event, but going back several years for Games User Research Summits. It's a wonderful archive of information. So not only is our Discord a great resource for aspiring researchers or folks early in their careers, or even late career folks looking for exposure to new information, novel methods and approaches. Yes, the Discord is a great resource, of course. But in addition to that, we have our wonderful YouTube channel where we have all of those archived conference presentations over the last few years. And there's all kinds of different topics ranging from accessibility and narrative usability testing, play testing in the indie spaces, play testing in the AAA spaces. Lots of great discussions as well for how you can break into this field. So of course, we'll be answering some of your questions today. But for further information, strongly encourage you to visit the YouTube channel to get access to our former event talks and panels, because there's just a wealth of information there. And I'll just do a quick plug for the next Games User Research Summit. I just want to highlight, I'm not on the planning committee for that event this year. After doing it for a few years, I decided to take a break. So I've stepped back, and some other really awesome folks are handling that event this year. And I believe it's going to be a hybrid event with sessions streamed online, which we have typically done in the past as well. But I think there's going to be more infrastructure this year for facilitating online discussions and social activities. And in addition to that, it is going to be in person in Salt Lake City. So we cordially invite all of you to check out our next Games User Research Summit in Salt Lake City. The theme this year is Metamorphosis, and we are currently accepting submissions for presentations, panels, workshops, roundtable discussions. The submissions are open until about mid-January. So if it hasn't been shared already, I'll share the link to the website in just a moment, and really encourage you, if you have an idea for a talk, or folks who might be interested in submitting a talk, or you want to get together with your colleagues and friends in the industry and host a roundtable, please consider sharing your ideas and projects, presentations with us. It is just a really exciting venue to share that information. I've been going pretty regularly myself since about 2016 or 17. And that was before I was a professional in this industry. That's when I was a student. And being a part of this community has been so valuable, not just for me leveling up my research skills and knowledge, but just meeting wonderful folks like I'm now, now I'm part of a panel with awesome people I've met through this community and at the conference. So it is a really great opportunity for networking as well.
I'll just add, it is a research-focused conference, but we have a lot of UX designers as well. We have a lot of, well, not a lot of mainline game devs, but those folks are entirely welcome, especially to submit. Love seeing content, retrospectives, best practices, all that kind of thing from the game development pipeline, or from the academic side of things as well. So I also want to just speak a bit to the Games UR GRUX Online event, which is not the same event that Jess was talking about. So we have Games UR, and then there's also GRUX Online. That was an event, as Laura mentioned, run recently by Emma Vario and Sebastian Wong. Seb, I see here is in chat, so if you have any questions for the organizers, feel free to ping him. That was an excellent event. We had several hundred people come to that as well. All that information is available up on YouTube, so please do feel free to make use of those resources. All right, so for the rest of this, we've got just kind of a set of questions that I was ready to ask our panelists here about kind of the state of the research and design industry. But what we prefer to I'm not going to say boring questions, but prepared questions are, Vivian, you don't need to nod. That's if you folks have questions for our panelists, please feel free. I'd love to have those instead of what we have here. But while we're waiting for those, so let's get COVID out of the way, because
can we?
Yeah.
Right now?
Just eliminate it like that?
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Why are you just thinking
so? So obviously, in the terms of just game development, it's been an enormous change. having to switch fully to work from home for both indie and AAA studios. Academia has been facing this equally. For research in particular, I think this has been a very interesting shift. I do some of my work in accessibility, obviously, so there's been some benefits that we've seen as the kind of the growth of platforms like Zoom. A lot of the feature sets that have come online because of this, very unfortunate and tragic as a necessity. But I wanted to kind of get folks' thoughts on how this has changed kind of how you do your jobs, on how you fulfill your roles, and where you see this going in the future. Is anyone that wants to jump in?
I can start. So yeah, COVID did change a little bit how companies understand mental health. I think it has been more, I think the awareness has grown because of COVID, and the way the processes internally shifted to the online resources and how to connect with users, bringing more diversity because you can connect with a range of different users too. So that's very interesting to observe. You don't have any more like a niche thing. You can actually expand that experience to more people. And as a professional, like inside of the industry, the concept of mental health and how work is being done, since COVID has taken a toll on everyone. I think mental awareness is mental health awareness is way higher than before, and companies are concerned with that, giving more like time and flexibility. And I don't think this is going to go back to what it was before because of COVID.
Yeah, excellent points.
For us with academic research, one of the things that I actually liked about this kind of remote research session world is we, especially in the first few months where I was calling participants and saying like, hey, don't come in. Here's a Google Hangouts link. We're going to try something new. We were trying some really bizarre stuff of how to do play testing rapidly when you have everything shut down one day and you still have sessions tomorrow. Trying to use things like Google Slides to do play testing, because particularly for a lot of the projects I had at the time, I was working with older adults and gaming. So understanding different ways we can build games to ameliorate cognitive decline, or very timely, and it wasn't intended that way, how to foster social relationships when people are disparate, when they're remote. So we were doing some really crazy stuff with Google Suites and using it in a way that it wasn't intended at all, because it gave us a common workspace that people were already familiar with. We didn't have to onboard people into special playtesting software that they hadn't seen before, or send out links or instructions. That was a launching point for us to reach demographics and populations that in the past have had a hard time persuading people that it was worth it, essentially, because really you want to bring people into the lab. But now I could say, hey, you know, there's this group up in Canada that are like in a remote area, and that would be an interesting demographic to try this with. So we were able to diversify our population, our demographics, and also for accessibility, I could reach out to people that historically have had a difficult time getting to our campus. So Georgia Tech is in the heart of Midtown. Parking is at a premium. If you have accessibility needs, that can be really challenging, or public transit isn't super great. It lowered the barrier to entry in terms of finances, time to get here, medical issues if they were here. I hope that we can carry that out of COVID and use this as a rationale to reach out to different pockets of the disability community, older adults, just get a really much more diverse sample size. I hope we keep that after COVID. I hope there's an after COVID.
Following up on what Laura said, yeah. It's really nice to actually recruit people for like a test that isn't just like, do you live in Los Angeles? Okay, you can come to our test. And a lot of decisions we made on the game are like all based on people from Los Angeles. So there's obviously some like inherent problems with that, and it's like the best we can do because we can't afford to fly for a while. But like COVID has like forced a lot of researchers kind of like get and to like establish practices on their own that rely on like remote testing and like improve those methodologies and like kind of like tools from the ground up. Like a lot of us are using Parsec now, which originally was just like used to share games so people could like virtual monitor in on someone else's computer and like play a game. Now it's being used to like kind of test new stuff, which has been like really good. And Parsec has been like great to work with in like understanding capabilities and like needs of like the various companies and like trying to work with us and like what we want like players to see. Like they can like watermark stuff, so which has been like nice for like protecting and like kind of comforting developers when we say like, hey, we want to remote test, but they're really scared that like leaks. It's always been a big fight whenever you bring a remote testing. Like everyone's scared of like leaks happening from the test, but usually it's like we almost never see any of our participants leak because they're just like happy to be in a test. COVID itself has affected companies very differently in forcing us to like learn how to work from home and now like learn how to work in a hybridized format of like what happens if like you work from home with people like working from within the company. And personally, I hope like more companies will say like we're allowed to work remotely from like wherever we want, because we've demonstrated that we can, and like not a lot of like efficiency has been lost, and we've kind of like all developed our ways of like handling it within that like circumstance. What else? Jess, do you have anything to add here?
Yeah, I think your final point there is really interesting to consider, Jimmy, because there's this sort of emancipatory idea that the games industry has adapted to work from home. Yet I know that this varies wildly across the industry. Companies and studios all have their own different philosophy in terms of whether things are returning back to normal, or there's going to be hybrid approaches, or if fully offsite will be permitted. So it is exciting because I know previously like the games industry had been pretty strongly opposed to the idea of work from home. So it's pretty awesome to see these discussions opening up and seeing models change. At the same time, I know for user research, a lot of the jobs that I'm seeing, like recruiters reaching out to me, for instance, or seeing job descriptions posted on LinkedIn, I'm still seeing user research jobs like being required. If you're going to be a user researcher, you have I'm still seeing that requirement for a lot of positions that you have to be on site. So, and again, this can vary wildly depending whether you're working in industry or academia, or maybe what country you're working in. But I've actually been kind of surprised to see how many positions are still requiring user researchers to relocate, because I think there's this assumption that in a few months everyone will be back in the studios or the offices, and UR labs are going to open up again, where we're going to have on-site testing, which I think is exciting. It's great for risk mitigation with those leaks you were talking about. On the other hand, though, I think it does seem like a bit, I'm not like a step back, but maybe there's still maybe more room to grow in terms of how we think about user research being integrated remotely. Because I agree, like there are pros and cons to both approaches. I know I really want to get back in the labs again. Like I work with projects like you, Jimmy, that, we know stakeholders can be apprehensive to test things remotely because of leaks. It's like that's just how it is. But on the other hand, I think we are finding that the leaks, like if leaks are happening, it doesn't seem like it's a huge thing that is any riskier than other types of like how information is shared out. Like we often see that leaks, like the things that turn up on Twitter, often like it's not necessarily through playtesting, it's through entirely other different means of how the leaks originated. So yeah, I think where I'm going with that is, yes, I think there's something to celebrate. It does feel like we're seeing this cultural shift, which is exciting. But on the other hand, I'm still seeing a lot of jobs say like, we expect you to relocate.
Yeah.
If I could add, oh, sorry, go ahead, Johnny.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I agree. However, I do think it's a step back if we end up like slipping back and just like doing testing physically. Like we get a lot out of it, right? I know some people use like live feedback sentiment trackers that have like set up with like buttons and stuff. But we also don't hit like our populations, and I mean our tests live and die by the people we sample by. Like there's not much point if we hit like an entire group that just doesn't fit like our needs, like the target audience. So I think like it is slightly annoying and like worrying that a lot of companies are saying like, oh yeah, like COVID will be over in like 6 months, and then 6 months later they change it like, oh okay, in 3 months, oh okay, in like 4 months, and like the goalpost keeps moving back and forth. So like a lot of people aren't like fully preparing for that situation of like, hey, what if we just like focus on this and integrate it and like make it a reliable system we can like go to and use for the future as well.
So to speak to a student perspective too, so within colleges and universities, so I also am, it's not my title, but I'm a professor, and then I teach a variety of gaming and UX types of classes on campus. I think there is a silent brain drain happening that we don't realize the full impact of with classes having gone virtual. This is not a format that works for a lot of students. The students that would be seeding this industry later and looking at these jobs and thinking about relocating, I think we're having a lot of students just vanish out of their training that would support the games user research and games user experience industry 2 to 5 years down the line now. There's also a number of graduate students who were swayed by the idea that, oh, if I get a master's or a PhD, I may be a more attractive candidate, or I can get the role in this industry that I would prefer. And they had vast changes to the way that their research was going to work. So I was one of the, I've been working as research faculty for 10 years, but at the same time, I was completing my PhD, which I just defended 2 days ago, almost to the hour. And I think I proposed the day before we went into lockdown. So that lab study suddenly had to be online. And I think a lot of students, they don't have the resources or the capability to add on another year or so. So I think there's a number of pre-professionals, I guess, so these students, these up and coming juniors that are leaving the industry entirely. And I don't think we know the impact of that just yet. Thank you for the congratulations. I slept for 16 hours the day after. But maybe some of the students in here, if you're in the same situation too, because I would be very concerned about your networking capability, because that's how you get jobs. It is who you know.
Yeah, that actually kind of ties together a couple things that I think were really interesting that you folks brought up. One is that game development is very much a collaborative, iterative process. And I think having seen that from the inside of the industry, it's challenging to do that online. Like I really like Zoom. I appreciate a lot of the features. I am a disabled person, so I really appreciate some of the stuff like having a chat log. I have ADHD. That's really helpful for me. When I get distracted, I can go back and be like, oh, what was the, okay, cool. This is the conversation. So there's a lot of benefits there. But I also just miss sitting down with my designers and like just having them walk me through stuff, having them show me through a game level and stuff like that. And then obviously the shifts that we're seeing in just who has access, right? Like in one way, this is democratized things, but in another way, if you don't have a high-speed internet connection, like that makes access to education or resources potentially much more difficult. I also want to touch on kind of the international perspective here as well. But my view, I'm from Canada, my view is very North American centric. So I know we have folks here that are more familiar with the international market. So do you folks want to chime in on kind of what that has looked like?
Yeah, for sure. It's been a while that I haven't been in Brazil, but since I moved to Canada, the cultural differences are huge, and even how the way that you talk, the way that you the way that you express yourself or anything, since your portfolio, your resume, it's completely different. So you do face this cultural barrier to start a networking process without knowing the connections that you need to make. So those events in real life actually helped a lot, and was the way that I actually got into the industry. The networking is fundamental on that part, and sometimes online it kind of creates this barrier, but it helps in just for us to stay connected. But there is a huge difference between markets, at least from when I left to here. I don't know how it is right now, because I believe that there is some changes happening. The games industry is a fast-paced environment where things change very, very rapidly. So, but from what I remember, you do have even differences on speaking about your paycheck. Like, it's completely forbidden here, and it was impact for me, like how I cannot comment about that. It's a delicate situation when you face that. Sometimes there's companies that require you to not speak in contract, so that also create a barrier for minorities, because you don't know how much you should be paid for your work. So it's very confusing at the beginning, and there is a lot of like imposter syndrome, because you don't know how you're going to fit in. And I've been there, and that's how I try to guide my mentees, like how to get into the industry in this point, because it is very different, very challenging if you're coming from another background, to understand the behavior, to understand how to put yourself in the industry, and how to make those connections, and how to make the strong connections too, because that matters too.
Yeah, following up on what Vivian said, I worked a lot with China teams, and COVID has been an interesting obstacle and like semi-boon as well for like working with them, just because I've had to like rebuild those relationships from the ground up from like anyone else previously who has like worked on my team. And like working with China teams typically has been like, they really trust you and like to work with you once you get to like, once they get to know you in person and have like hung out with you in like a non-business setting, if you go out drinking like after work or something. Obviously we cannot do that anymore. So it's not only forced like us to kind of like reconsider those relationships, but also them, and like redevelop them, and then like kind of get them more comfortable with the idea of like we should be establishing like these like what cultural norms like through distantly like across like different countries as well, like and time zones. So this also makes certain things a little weird, like working with their labs. Like some countries just run physical labs. Like I've worked with teams in China who like love to run physical labs and like will like recruit participants, and others who consider like the idea of like running remote like something interesting and they would want to try. So it feels like you're kind of like retreading ground like that you've already worked on here. Like, hey, these are the tools I've worked with and like the stuff I've worked with as well. Like, why don't you try it? And it's kind of like a process of like going through it all once more, like with each country you work with, and considering like their capabilities and what you have to consider like across that's different like across cultures as well. On the topic of pay, yes, I have really strong feelings about that. I think it's actually kind of fucked up how our industry underpays us a lot in comparison to tech, and how they like it is really difficult to understand like pay bands growth in like payment overall like per role in comparison to like a lot of other places. California, you're legally obligated they're legally obligated to tell you the pay band, but what a lot of people do is like use specific wording and kind of get around that. So it's not like they're breaking the law, they're just kind of like going around it slightly, and everything's still legal. It's just a little messed up where you don't really know until like you have to interview and you get to the end and then you ask about the payrolls, and even then they like still won't tell you, but you get hints of like what the pay band might look like depending on like what they offer you, and if you ask about growth and like how long it takes to grow.
Competitive, that's how they say.
Yes, it's also like pretty competitive. So that's something to keep in mind.
Click on that link that James just put in. Go look at those,
yes,
those data.
Found a survey. They're always helpful. And also get a mentee, get a mentor for you. I think it helps you to break this cultural barrier. I got one, and once that I got it, it was like, oh my God, now is everything clear. I think it helps a lot for those who are immigrating and starting connections and don't know where to start. And GRUX has an amazing format for mentorship, and I totally recommend. It really changed my view of the market and how I could make things work for me too, not just like trying to fit in, you know. Sorry, I cut you, Jimmy.
No, I think my final thoughts is just it's like more ranty. It's like I think it's super stupid how we had to do all this for like pay, and then our payment is not dependent on like our abilities, but how well we negotiate. Like
Yes,
I found out,
negotiation skills.
yeah, I found out through like constantly interviewing and understanding my skill set and trying to keep it up to date that rejecting them is part of the negotiation. And it's like a scary thing to do, but suddenly they offer you like 5 to 10K more after you say, I don't want to join you because of like the pay, instead of just like straight up negotiating, like straight up rejecting them as like part of the song and dance. And I'm like, why would I ever want to do that if it's my first job and like I really want this role? Like the amount of times I see people start at the lowest pay band possible without knowing what happened is like way too high.
There's a few elements on that. Like you are passionate about something. It also messed up your like rational thinking on that part, because you're gonna get afraid to lose that opportunity. And exactly what you're saying, because you do have an emotional connection with. Usually, who is in the game industry loves games, and like it's everything for the person. And I'm exactly the same. Many of you are in the same spot, but there's also the lack of knowledge around negotiation, because this is not taught. This is not something that you just learn by doing and getting those advice for someone else that is older in the industry and knows how the things kind of works. There's a lot of like tricky things like I never faced before back in Brazil, which is you need to jump to another company to actually have a better paycheck, and then you go back and forth, because
Same in academia.
right, like that's how the thing works. And it's just strange because you can be loyal. It feels like conflicting because you like the company, but you need to leave to actually have a better recognition sometimes. So career-wise, the companies are kind of like, because of COVID too, there's a shift of thinking in development. And for minority, there's a lack of support sometimes. You don't know how to make it better, even working in the industry, and like how you're going to grow and how you're going to get this knowledge to fill your gaps, because there is differences in work. And to be honest, like I learned so much more reading books and going to workshops than ever being in Brazil working in the industry for like 10 years. So it's just such a huge difference that once that you're in, like you need to find those supports, and you don't think about it if you don't have a guidance.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but like honestly, I think it like if you are looking for better pay, sometimes your only option is to move somewhere else, because the pay band increases or salary bumps across the board may take years to happen. And yeah, I think it's a regrettable aspect of not just games, but just capitalism in general, unfortunately. And games is firmly entrenched in capitalism. So yeah, it's an ugly thing we all have to contend with. But I think for juniors, I would actually recommend like don't hold your first opportunity so precious that you don't shop around. Or like Jimmy is a great example of someone who's like interviews just to get a sense of market worth. I've done that myself as well, to get a sense of how much I'm worth on the market. And it's a very powerful thing to learn about yourself. And quite frankly, it's very empowering when you know that, what, if I do find that I'm unhappy with my circumstances, I can leave because I know that there is a market for people with me like my skills. And it could be an opportunity where I'm in a more financially comfortable position, right? So I would actually recommend for juniors, don't feel like it's actually probably not such a terrible thing if you don't get that dream job that you're wanting right out the door, right? Think of your first job as getting your foot in the door, stay there for a year, get that experience, and leverage that to make a move where you're going to be happier in terms of fit and compensation.
Yeah,
Well,
I think
I'll add for the academic thing, like don't sleep on academia. I know that both industry and academia have problems, we'll say, to say the least, but there are far more different jobs in academia than just tenure track professorships. So for example, I'm research faculty. I can work on anything I want. It's hard to beat the freedom to do the research and games that you want to do than academia. So no, you don't really get to negotiate your pay because it's pretty much locked, or it's whatever you can bring in terms of funding. But for those of you going through school, this may be something, if you really love research and you want to do something closer to academic GUR, position yourself smartly. A CS PhD, so if that's the path that you want to take and you want to be in games research, for a 9-month contract, you could start in a fairly cheap place to live like Atlanta. You could start around 110 or 120. That's just for 9 months. And I have colleagues that are making more than 200K because they have CS PhDs and they've been in the field for a while. Now, if someone has a digital media, human-centered computing, it's hard to find HCI PhDs, psychology, those are going to be a little bit less pay. But if you love research, you're considering pay, you want to be in places that universities are, it's something you can do, and you can always go back and forth to industry. People do it all the time, which is another way that you get increased pay. You go to industry, then an academic unit wants you and you're like, that's cool, but they were paying me X. What are you going to do? The university will pony it up in many cases.
Two other things to add. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Two other things to add to this topic. Also, because of COVID, I discovered that I had a disability too, and don't feel afraid, or don't let this imposter syndrome fall into on that, because I almost did. Because I'm disabled, I'm less or not. Like it's difficult. It's just different. It's not a something negative. And sometimes once that you're so critical with yourself, so self-critical, criticism is hard to deal with, especially when you have disabilities on top. So don't feel afraid to do this type of steps for your career. And that's going to guarantee you a better place to be. And always questioning, always be interviewing to see what the market is, recognizing you too, because that was something that I failed on it. I stopped and I stagnated, and you cannot allow yourself to stagnate.
Yeah, in regards to disability, there's a lot of disabled folks in the games industry. You are not going to be alone by any stretch of the imagination. So I want to bring in a question from Sebastian Long. What does Games UR have to do as a discipline to increase pay, ideally much closer to mainstream tech levels? That's tough. I think that's tough. There's certainly an opportunity cost. Gaming, as Vivian said earlier, people get into games because they're passionate. That increases competition, which drives down wages. But anyone have thoughts on, could this be reversed? What could we do to make this a little bit more balanced?
Yes, talking about wages has really helped a lot. Not only in understanding like how much everyone is getting paid and what company is getting paid, but also the dumb, stupid stuff that like HR and other people do when they interview you for like getting you to talk about wages, or like kind of pushing them to talk about it as well to understand. I know a few companies have also been trying to up their pay band in comparison to like a lot of the big tech. So I think eventually it'll start scaling up, but it's going to be really slow if like people don't recognize that they're getting like underpaid, or even like for the area they're in comparison to like everything else as well. A lot of discussions have really helped just for like being in Riot, like being able to talk to my coworkers about what we pay openly, and like being able to bug my manager about like growth and like what the next like pay band looked like and when I would hit it has been like really helpful in like trying to smooth it out for me and be like, hey, I want to hit like this goal.
Yeah, Jimmy, those are some really great points. Like having a career development plan where you work is, of course, a really valuable tool to ensure that you're on track to hit your goals, especially when it comes to promotion and compensation. On the other hand, sometimes there are a lot of things beyond your control. Like if there's needs to be like a business justification for a promotion or an increase in pay, and those decisions aren't made lightly by any means. And I think this whole discussion about salary, like upping salary in the industry, but specifically for user research, it's, unfortunately, those decisions don't come down to our managers or even whoever's in charge of your department. We're going to it's often much higher up than your immediate team's leadership, which I think does make the situation very complex. And for personnel involved, it can be understandably very frustrating. So I think, it's something where it has to be a broader shift in organizational culture to realize, okay, we value UXR, we value the expertise that these professionals bring to our company. And because we want to retain them, we're going to make the decision to increase salary for everyone on the team, right? Not just for certain people or not just for when they hit a certain promotion milestone, but across the board, we're going to up everyone's pay. I do think it comes down to just elevating the work that we're doing and how valuable we are and the skill sets we bring. I think it was mentioned earlier, a lot of folks entering this field professionally now have master's degrees minimum, and a lot of them, like myself, have PhDs. And when you have a PhD, that's a huge amount of investment. Take it from me and Laura. It's a lot of time. It's a very specialized skill set, and it is something that other industries do find really valuable, whether it's academia or other sectors of the tech industry more broadly. Recognize that someone with a PhD not only has a specialized skill set, but they're often people who are highly motivated and driven to work very independently. And, basically having a PhD is like a license to learn. You've gone through that process and you demonstrate that you're capable of doing that by finishing. And yeah, and I think that is just something that's undervalued. Even the master's degrees that specialize, doing a master's thesis, that's generally a significant research endeavor. It's a contribution to knowledge. It's domain level expertise. And because I think we're not, our skills aren't super visible per se. People see that we write, we run studies and we write things, but they don't necessarily see Jess created a level, or, Jimmy created, a new character or whatever, right? It's our skills are not nearly as tangible as other roles in game development. And so I think it's about demonstrating that impact and the value we provide. And yeah, I think it's something that takes a lot of, just a lot of time, a lot of investment, and it's going to be a cultural shift that has to happen in organizational culture.
Half of my job, I always say, is just teaching people what I do, explaining. It's the communication. It's not doing the thing that I'm capable of doing. It's telling people why I'm important and I need to be on their project, why they need me. And I think what's interesting with games research is that we're at the tip of this interactive media sword, and it's pushing different boundaries. So you get to tell people, in some cases, you get to invent new jobs for yourself. I do esports user research, which is wild. I'm studying everybody from fans to players to professional players. I'm just telling people that's what I do. And if there's value in that, then you can set that price. But you've got to get really good at being persuasive and telling people why they have to have you.
It looks like more a matter of soft skills and how professionally understand the market, and actually your own skills. Soft skills are important to realize that point and be good in negotiation and be good to convince someone that your role is important, or maybe create a career for yourself. And I think this undisclosure situation of paychecks and how much you can profit from in a determined level of career, it hurts minorities a lot, because you do need to have a title and you need to know the range for that title, or at least how much it's being paid for, because we don't know. And once you don't know, you're gonna change. You're just gonna depreciate a little bit yourself just to get into the industry. And that's kind of force the whole situation to just stay the same, or even worse, so getting worse with the time, because oh, there's people accepting the role for less, so we're going to hire this way. And that's how Brazilian market got worst. It was exactly because of that reason. Even though we disclose our yearly income, or usually we deal by month, like how much you're going to pay by month, it kind of deprecated the market because people are accepting less and less, and it's the only opportunity they have, so they jump in. So going over, maybe, I know that is a competition that is higher, but going over companies that are transparent with that will force other companies to also be transparent with that. So, and changing on HR behaviors to hiring people and so on. It's up to the market too, it's up to us to force companies to behave the way that is fair.
Yeah, challenging situation for sure. All right, so we have just about 5 minutes left. Thomas Bowden has asked a question. Hello, talking about spreading UX fundamentals. What would you consider being UX fundamentals? UX methodology, engagement understanding, SDT, motivations, emotions, usability. Where would you start? Where would you stop? Big question.
I don't think you never stop, but I would go first for methodologies. I just understanding the basics. It's always good, even older ones, like experienced ones in the market, you need to go back to it and go back to fundamentals always. I think it's methodologies are part of it. And then understanding behavior is, of course, is part of that. Like, as you understand the laws, it's part of like tailoring, breaking down those behaviors and how you understand them to the game industry. And then usability comes right attached. I think that's kind of like how you, in my view.
I'm smiling because if anybody was in the introductory session, you heard Catherine promote the new book that's coming out, Celia's new book and Catherine's new book. So I'm going to put the link here. I'm doing my due diligence. So I'm one of the authors. Me and 2 other colleagues wrote the esports chapter, but for anybody looking for what these fundamentals are, specifically for Games UR, if you haven't seen the first book, you should definitely check this book out. I believe it's available for pre-order now, but I think it'll be available in your hands in February.
Oh, good to know.
Yeah, when I first started a decade ago, I got handed Catherine's, I'm not sure if it's her first book, but Games Usability was like, here you go. That was what was available. That was it. That was the only thing we had.
Yep.
So really excited to see this next version. And I recognize a whole lot of the names from the research group in that book. Very, very good folks. So yeah, highly recommend. Other thoughts on UX fundamentals? What makes up our field? So I'll add to this. As a researcher, my focus is on the player. It's all about the player experience. The previous panel had a lot of good conversation around playtesting and getting feedback any way you can. That is challenging, but super important. We are not making games for ourselves. We are not our users. You really need to understand that as a game developer, whether you're working in research, design, whatever you're doing. I think that's fundamental to understanding, to doing well, at least, what we do. All right, so we have just about 5 minutes left here. Panelists, was there anything else that you wanted to bring up? Any final thoughts here that you wanted to make sure you got a chance to share? Just on the state of our industry, the state of the field.
I want to mention again, another community I'm part of is We Can Fix in UI. It's an amazing resource, and there's a lot of colleagues in there. I totally recommend. They're caring, they share transparency all the information that you might need. It's the same as GRUX, but it's a smaller group, but not that small. We're growing. So totally worth it to check it out. And I left in the chat the link for the website that guides you to the community.
I hope being able to work remotely lets me do more interesting things beyond just running playtests, like actually being able to do like diary studies and potentially ethnographic studies in the future. And I think I'm very close to convincing people in my company to let me do that. So if everyone else pushes for it, then I get to do it. So I think you should all push for it.
Great.
I wanted,
Dropping. Oh, go ahead, Jess. You go for it.
yeah, I guess my closing remarks be, I know earlier we were talking about how the more remote testing, more remote research in the work from home environment has enabled us to reach a greater number of participants with different needs and who fit different demographics, which is awesome. But I want to remind everyone that our participants for user research are only as diverse as our databases are. And just because we're work from home and we're now testing remotely doesn't necessarily mean that our databases are suddenly more diverse. So my challenge would be to everyone in this industry, whether you're a designer or a researcher, or you have a hand in curating these playtester databases, just want you to consider the fact that like our work can only be as inclusive as our participants are, right? Because they're the ones giving the feedback. And let's face it, especially in AAA, our databases tend to skew heavily white and heavily male. And there needs to be more work in expanding how we reach a greater number of diverse participants. I know that's been a challenge I've experienced in my own work. My colleagues have experienced that in their own work. And so I think there's still work to be done. I would like to see us get to a place where, yes, we can continue to test remotely, but let's leverage that to hopefully expand the number of diverse folks we're reaching to. And I think we're starting to see that, as you all have spoken to, but I think it always comes back to the database. Who's in the database? That impacts, of course, who we're actually reaching. So any way we can strategize to diversify our playtester databases it's just going to be a huge boon to the diversity of perspectives we're getting in our work. So something to consider.
With more diverse people inside of the company, also this gets pushed because we want to test in diverse people too. So
Speaking of diversity, a last invite, please join our Discord and check out the talks, particularly from GRUX Online for UX folks. Those are on our YouTube. There's 19 talks in there. We've already had hundreds, I think, over 1,000 views, and look for the call for proposals for the Games User Research Summit. So please join our Discord and add that diversity in your voice, whether you are UX, UR, junior, or advanced.
Yes, please. All right, that is going to wrap us up for the panel. Thank you very much to my panelists. Thank you very much to Celia for another excellent event.
Yes,
I'm
thank you for
really
the
looking
invite.
forward to the new book. So thank you, everybody. As folks have mentioned, please join the communities, share your voice. You have value to this industry. Please bring it. We need a whole lot of people that look a lot less like this. But that would be nice.
Quite handsome.
Okay. We don't need quite so many white dudes. Let's bring in some more folks, right? The basic truth is I now represent a minority of the gaming market. So we need to adjust the industry to account for that. All right, thank you very much. We'll see you folks later.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.